Sarah. Welcome to the Miracles Happen Fertility Podcast.
Thank you. It's so lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm so happy that you outreached to get on this podcast. I'm like, yes, I want to talk to you. Very similar styles, and you know the I don't know many things, but a huge piece that is missing from my own knowledge is about nutrition, which we're going to be talking about today in tandem and connection with all these other cool topics that we love to dive into.
Definitely.
So first, I just want to know, and my audience wants to know, who are you and what do you do and how did you come to do it?
So I guess my professional journey sort of intersects with my personal journey in terms of health. And I think that's obviously, it sounds like that's your story too. So I think that's quite common for a lot of people in the health industry. So as a young adult and adolescent, I suffered with a lot of health issues. So things like acne, chronic migraines, irritable bowel syndrome, and hormonal sort of imbalances. Yeah. And bless my parents, in their infinite wisdom, they decided to trot me off to my general practitioner. I think you call them an MD over there. We call them a GP. Mm-hmm. And at about the age of, I think, 14 or 15, they put me on the contraceptive pill as the solution to all of my problems. That's what they do everywhere, right? And so, as we know, that didn't actually change anything apart from maybe giving me a sense of a semi-regular cycle. So I still suffered with all of those health issues, and it sparked in me a real interest and curiosity in all things health, even as a young age, because I think I felt like I wanted to fix myself or change myself because I wasn't particularly well. But it wasn't really until my mid-20s when I decided to come off the contraceptive pill. I read Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom by Christine Northrup, Dr. Northrup. Love. And I went, oh, I know. I thought you would appreciate that. So, and I decided that I would come off the contraceptive pill. And basically, year after year, I failed to menstruate. And that went on for 10 years. So I suffered with amenorrhea for 10 years. And that was really the real catalyst for me to delve really deeply and try and uncover what was happening inside of my body. Because even though I went to hundreds of specialists, I went to energy healers and all of the conventional, specialists, gynecologists and doctors and all of the like, the resounding answer from the conventional medical world was, don't worry about it. Just get back on the contraceptive pill. And when you want to conceive, we've got drugs for that we can sort that out for you. And I just intuitively knew and felt that not cycling, there was something really wrong. And so I really wanted to get to the bottom of that. I really wanted to uncover what that was. And so that was a quest of roughly 10 years. And, in the latter stages of that quest, a friend handed me a book that would be profoundly transformative in my life. And that was a book by one of my largest mentors, Paul Chek, which is called How to Eat, Move and Be Healthy. And I started to read the book. It's amazing for anybody that's interested. It's quite simple and it's been around for a long time. But I started to read the book and I really resonated with the information in the book. And then I started to apply the principles in the book to my life around diet and lifestyle and holistic health. And I really started for the first time to notice that my body was healing. My digestion was so much better. My skin was better. My cycle came back. Now, it didn't come back to a 28-day cycle, but eventually when I just continued to practice all of these nutrition and lifestyle principles, my cycle returned to a perfect 28-day cycle. Beautiful. And many, many years later, and I can share my fertility story maybe later if you like, because it's a bit of an interesting and fun story as well. But when I eventually did go on to meet my now partner and try to conceive, we conceived without any assistance in the first month that we tried. And I was 39 years old at the time.
Oh, amen to that.
Amen to that. And so I suppose when I found this book and I started to apply these principles and I started to notice a true healing in my body, I was really curious to discover more about this information. And I discovered that the author of this book had an internationally acclaimed institute. He's in the States, called the Czech Institute. And so I went on to study through the Czech Institute, and I studied holistic lifestyle coaching through that institute over the course of about 3 years. And as I was fortunate enough to work with Paul Czech himself, and he encouraged me to move out of, I was in a sort of really high-powered senior executive corporate role working in the media.
Yes.
Earning the, very big 6-figure role and, strutting around in my high heels and sitting under fluorescent lights all day and stressing myself out. And he cajoled me and encouraged me to transition away from that and into a health coaching career. And I've been doing that now for 10 years and, working predominantly with women around health and hormones and fertility.
Oh my God, that's fantastic. Oh, I love when you follow your intuition where it leads, and then you feel, I don't know how you feel now compared to corporate job, but it seems to me this is such a beautiful fit, right? Like, yeah.
Oh my gosh. I feel like, I was, part of the reason that I probably wasn't menstruating was that I was in the yang. I was so yang dominant, right?
Yes.
So I was like running all the time. I was in this male dominated industry. I was working so hard. I was drive, push. I was so disconnected from my feminine.
Yeah.
And when I started to do all of the nutrition and lifestyle practices, which included meditation and sleep hygiene and sun exposure during the day and, more spiritual practices, as well as all the practical food practices, I started to integrate and embody more feminine. And then, what I do now in my work is feminine, because I'm nurturing, I'm helping, I'm supporting, and I'm embodying those things myself as well.
Okay. Ooh,
so it's like a different person.
You're a different human.
Yeah.
I feel the same way. Okay. So and I would absolutely love to hear your fertility story, but before we get to that, I have one simple question. I read that you are a banana bread expert. I need to hear about this.
Oh my gosh. Well, I have a blog with some recipes on it, and the number one recipe that is always the most popular searched is my banana bread recipe.
Okay. I had to know. Okay.
But I have to confess that I actually made that banana bread, I think, and ate it every single day. The one on my blog, so you can link to it. I'll send you a link. It's grain-free and sugar-free, and it can be dairy-free if you don't want to, but I put butter in it because I love butter. Yes, I ate that banana bread non-stop for like 5 years, and I literally cannot eat it now because I'm so sick of it.
That's hilarious. The banana
and even my
son can't eat it.
Yes, exactly. Even my son, I fed it to him so often that he was just like, Mum, no thanks.
That's enough. Cutting it off. It's funny. Okay, I had to ask that, but in more serious topics here. Tell us about your fertility story. I'd love to hear it.
Oh, okay. So it's more of a sort of personal, I guess it's like it's a spiritual manifestation story. So growing up and throughout my, 20s and 30s, and especially in my 30s, I just longed for a child. And I was a serial monogamous. I had a series of like 2-year relationships, and, especially into my 30s, they would get to that pointy end of the relationship where it was like, we probably need to make a decision and move forward in a commitment way. And it would always end at that pointy part of the relationship. And as I was getting closer to my mid-30s, I was starting to get increasingly anxious about the years I had left for procreation. And I also obviously had the underlying concern about my fertility because I'd been told by so many doctors and specialists that I would never conceive. And in my sort of, after I'd sort of, and I was obviously also focusing on my career. So, you know, that sort of stops things as well. And then in my sort of later end of the 30s, so maybe 37, I think, I was in a relationship with a young man who was 10 years younger than me, and he proposed to me. And the relationship was not the right relationship. I felt it in every single cell in my body. And when he asked me to marry him, my body said, "No, Sarah." And I said, "Yes." And I could feel in my body, I could feel that repulsion in my body, like, what are you doing? This is not in alignment with your soul. But I was so desperate for the stuff that came after that, the marriage, and then the child would come, and I was like slamming into my 40s, and I was crunching the numbers in my head, and I was like, I just have to do this. I just have to suck it up and marry someone that doesn't feel right for me. So I said yes. And, you know, as it would happen, the relationship just wasn't working from there. And eventually I had to so painfully and just torturously make the decision to leave that relationship. So when I left that relationship, I reckon I was 38. So, you know, math in my head on that is like, holy shit, I'm going to be 42 or 43 if, you know, waiting to meet someone, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, I fell into a very, very dark depression. I was suicidal, literally suicidal. I definitely was planning my suicide. Thankfully, I had some really helpful friends and family around that sort of talked me off the ledge, so to speak. But I was very, very depressed and felt that there was no hope left for, you know, one of my deepest desires. And I decided to see a therapist at the time to work through it. And she said to me in one of the sessions, "Have you thought about having a baby on your own?" And even though heaps of people had said that to me over the years, because everyone shared my desire for a family, it had never really sat until that moment. And when she said it, a light bulb went off, and I just went, oh my gosh, yes, that is the answer. And so I started exploring having a child on my own, and I booked into a clinic, and I put myself on the wait list for donor sperm. And as luck or fortune would have it, one of my mother's friends worked in the clinic as a therapist. So unbeknownst to me, I got bumped up that sperm donor list to the top. Yes. But as soon as I made that decision to have a baby on my own, oh my gosh, my whole life transformed. I got this amazing house because I was looking for somewhere to live and I couldn't find anywhere after my separation. This beautiful, amazing, totally affordable house just presented itself to me. My business just took off. It just started going gangbusters. People were just coming, running through the door, throwing money at me. Everything in my life started to flourish. I felt so supported by the universe, and because I guess I was taking action into my own hands. And so then I got the phone call, you have a donor. And so I went through the process of having an IUI, which you would know what that is, an intrauterine insemination. And just as I was about to start that process, an acquaintance of mine who knew my sort of story had met a young man again, and she had said, "I think you need to meet this friend of mine. I think you would be a good match." And I was very like, well, I'm not really open to that right now, because I'm doing this thing over here where I'm having a baby on my own. So I can't really, you know, I don't really want to date this guy. Anyway, he came in and he was very persistent with me. Sorry, what have I done there? Oh, there we go. And he was very persistent with me. And so I went on a couple of dates with him. The second date that I went on, I couldn't have a glass of wine because I thought that I was potentially pregnant.
Yeah.
Anyway, long story short, we fell in love, madly in love. Wow. And my IUI cycle didn't work. And 2 months after we had been together, I decided to confess to him what I was doing right as I met him. And the universe decided to reward me for all of my bravery and all of the action that it took. He turned around and said, "Why don't we start trying together?"
Holy shit.
So the very next
That's
month.
Amazing.
So after 2 months together, we were trying for a baby, and we conceived the next month after that. And now we're happily married with a 5-year-old.
Oh, that baby was waiting, just waiting. here's my dad right here, right here. There you go. Here, there you go.
I know. So I really feel like what it was that what was the most powerful part of that manifestation process was that I took action. That because I was in the victim mentality, right? I was like, oh, I'm never going to have a baby. Woe is me. It's never going to work out for me. And then when the universe rewarded that action is what I believe that and also that, and we can talk about this, that when I started the assisted fertility, I started to resonate and believe that I was fertile and that I was having a baby.
Yes.
And then I called that in.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And then when I talk to people about manifesting, it's interesting because you live as if it's already thus.
Yes.
Right.
And that's what I was doing.
And then when it does happen, you're like, of course, that's
how it
that's how it is. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. All right. Beautiful story. I definitely want to come back to this whole because there's so much more to this than obviously thus far, so much more to our conversation than nutrition. And I want to start there though, again, and then work our way back up to all these, how that's connected to this being in a fertile way, being fertile rather than striving for fertility, actually being fertile. And well.
Yes, love it.
Well.
Yes. Well. Okay. Yes.
So let's start with basic, come back down to ground. Because we're up here, as my husband would say, that's all well and good, but I'm hungry. So what are we going to do? Okay. All right. So one of the questions I asked you in the email today was about these current trends for nutrition, all these things like paleo and, low carb and like eat all the bacon and the cheese that you want or something. I don't know. I don't subscribe to them. So
no.
I am really curious what you think about that. And in contrast, if there is a contrast, what do you subscribe to, and what do you teach your clients about food and nutrition?
Yes. Okay. So let's start with the trends. I was actually on another podcast earlier this week with a local girl it's about IVF. So she's talking predominantly to IVF clients, but I was just saying that I think one of the biggest sort of roadblocks to fertility in a lot of women when it comes to food is all of those food fads, and especially fasting and keto.
Okay.
And even paleo and low carb, because they tend to be on the low carb and restrictive side of things. So, what I was explaining to her is that when we think about fertility at a really basic level, the female body is a mammalian body that is walking around on this planet like all the other mammals are. And our biological imperative is to procreate. And our body is, until menopause, our body is, and from, our menstruation years, in our fertile years, which is what we're talking about, our body is assessing our external environment and making decisions about whether or not it is an appropriate time for conception or not. And so when there is a lack of food, whether accidentally skipping meals or intentionally fasting, what that signals at a very basic physiological level is it signals that there's not enough food out there for me to stay alive really properly as much as I need to vibrate at a level of health. Certainly isn't enough for me to carry a baby inside of me. So when we're doing these things, we're literally signaling infertility. We are creating that at a physiological level. And then it's the same with low carb or sort of low nutrient foods as well. And we can talk about what the nutrient dense foods are that do help to signal fertility in a minute. But if you're depriving your body of an entire macronutrient are protein, carbs, and fat, then that again signals a lack of food in your external environment. If you don't have enough carbohydrates coming in, then that basically the body's like, oh, okay, there's a famine out here. So now is definitely not a good time for conception, because we need to, upregulate our stress hormones and just, focus on surviving this. Does that make sense?
Oh, that makes total sense. Yes.
So, that's the problem with a lot of these trends. And it's really unfortunate that they're really gaining so much traction at the moment, because I really think that, and I think that they appeal to us as women. And Lord knows, I had disordered eating throughout my entire teenage years and all through my 20s. Fasting particularly, or cutting out carbs, it really does appeal to, this cultural phenomenon to want to sort of starve ourselves and deprive ourselves. And it's in our cells as women, it's so, it's part of who we are. So I think it's really, really common. And I'd say that it's the most common thing. It's the first thing that I'm doing when I'm working with my clients, is just getting them to eat really regularly and eat all three of the macronutrients, so that their body can sense that there's an abundance of food in their external environment, and then it knows that it can upregulate hormones and create more fertility.
Yes. Oh, I love that. What do you think about when people, let's just say that there's a thing that isn't necessary, for the body to feel, like there's plenty of food, like a treat, let's throw in like ice cream or something. Let's say that someone likes ice cream, and when they don't eat the ice cream, they feel inside restricted. Do you talk about that at all? Like, can't have the coffee, can't have this, can't have that, can't have this, can't have that, like the treats. Do you talk about that with clients at all?
Yeah, definitely. Because, yes, that's a really good question, because I suppose, the first thing, I guess what I try and do with my clients is get them to focus on eating regularly, which will also, when you eat regularly, what you find is that you actually don't get the cravings anymore. Oftentimes women are craving, if they're not eating until midday, they are going to crave sugar for the whole rest of the day. Because again, if we think about how the body works, if you're not giving the body what it wants, it is so smart and adaptable. It is going to try and drive you to go and get what it wants. And if we deprive our body of nutrients, or we starve ourselves or fast or whatever, or we deprive our body of carbohydrates, your brain is going to become focused on that, right? And want you to have that, because the brain's like, I need glucose. You're not giving me enough. I need this for like cellular function and basic physiological functions. So it's going to just be like fixated on that. So firstly, that deprivation stuff can be really mitigated if we just start to nourish ourselves again. And then if we bring in the nourishing foods, which I call the sacred fertility foods, that will also signal more deep nourishment. And again, when the body feels more nourished, it doesn't crave those things as much.
That's fascinating. Okay. And that makes total sense. I definitely want to talk about sacred fertility foods. That's beautiful. I just wanted to give an example, because I've been eating much better for my thyroid, and just a lot of nutrients, a lot of vegetables and fruits, and gluten-free, grains and things like that. But
great.
The other day, it was just last night, my husband offered me a piece of chocolate, and I went, "Oh, no, thanks." And he's like, "Oh, because of your thing." I'm like, "No, actually, I don't want it."
Yes.
No, I actually don't want it.
Yes, that is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And that, and the other thing to say is that it's okay to have a bit of chocolate. It's okay to have some ice cream, and we need to help. I work with my clients to really help them to get rid of that binging, restricting cycle. But honestly, you've just articulated perfectly. Often they'll just say, look, when I eat regularly, like say an office worker, I don't know if this is a thing over there, but here it's really common to have like a morning tea a couple of times a week where people will bring cakes or buy cakes, and it's just
totally
in the office, right?
They don't call it that, but yeah.
Yeah. And they'll say, before I started eating really regularly and eating really nourishing foods, I would be uncontrollably over there and just eating the sweets and the treats that were there for the morning tea or the afternoon tea. But now that I'm eating regularly, I can walk past and people are like, what's going on? Don't you want to have some? And I'm like, no, I'm actually good. And it's not from a place of, restriction. It's just from a place of, I'm actually good. I don't need that.
That's perfect explanation. Thank you for answering that. And it makes total sense now that you say that. Because I was like, no, I actually don't want the chocolate. Like,
that's amazing. Yeah.
I actually don't. Tell us about fertile foods.
Okay. So my sacred, I have an online fertility program which covers this in a lot of detail, but I am going to give you the sort of backstory as to how I learned about these foods, and these are the foods that I implemented. Everything that I teach is what I implemented into my own life to help myself heal all of my health issues and become fertile. But the sacred fertility foods actually come from the work of a doctor, a little known doctor that published an amazing book called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. I don't know if you've heard of it.
No.
So it's the most amazing book. I will obviously provide all the links so that you can provide these for your listeners as well, and you might want to have a look at it. So this book, it's been in publication since I think the 1930s or the 1940s, and it's never come out of publication, which is pretty amazing. And he was a dentist, and he was based in the UK, and he was looking into predominantly children's mouths for many years, and all he was seeing was really crooked teeth, really narrow jaws, loads of breathing issues, sinus issues, hundreds of cavities. And he was like, this just doesn't look like health to me. I don't see these children as being healthy. And he said, I'm really curious. I want to explore what a healthy diet looks like. And so he had the perfect fortune of being like alive and exploring during a time where this was still possible. And I'll explain what I mean. So he traveled to 22 countries around the world, and every country he found a tribe that was living on the diet that it had been living on forever. So an indigenous tribe or village that was living on the natural diet that it had always existed on, that hadn't had any exposure to the so-called modern foods.
Yep.
And so he travelled far and wide. He came down and visited the Aboriginal tribes here in Australia. He visited the Maori in New Zealand. He found a small Swiss village in the Swiss Alps, a Gaelic fishing village, the Maasai in Africa, American Indian tribes up in the Everglades, some down in Central and South America. He literally went far and wide, 22 different tribes. And what he noticed and witnessed was he was very interested in, or maybe not obviously, but because he was a dentist, he was very interested in the teeth. Yes. and the craniofacial structure. So wide arches, open, beautiful sinuses, wide jaw. And what he witnessed in every single one of these tribes was the entire population of that tribe had the most beautiful and robust health. They all had perfectly straight teeth without a single cavity, without any orthodontics or any dentists. They all had perfect craniofacial structure. They were robust well into their 80s and 90s, totally compos mentis. They were so beautiful. But what he also noticed was that their diets were very different, obviously, all apart about the world, but there was certain foods that they would feed all the couples that were about to start conceiving, so couples that were maybe getting married in whatever the marriage ceremonies were for the various tribes traditionally. So there was special foods, sacred foods that they would feed all preconceptive couples, all pregnant women, all lactating women, and all young children.
Wow.
And they were for that real robust, healthy growth and development of that potential. So, in the growing womb, for the couples that were trying to conceive, and for those breastfeeding women and those young children, because they were all in a really important growth stage, right?
Yes.
And so I'll tell you what those foods were. But what he also noticed, which is, something for us all to think about, is that every single tribe that he visited, he also went and visited neighboring tribes that had some visitation from missionaries or had some exposure to modern foods. Now, these foods in the 1930s were not like the frankenfoods that we are potentially exposed to today. You're talking vegetable oil, white sugar, and white flour.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he has a book that is this thick. It is filled with photos, putting the photos of the tribes that were living on their natural diet next to the photos of the tribes that have had that exposure to the food. The tribes that have had the exposure to the food, all their teeth fell out. Like they were riddled with cavities, their teeth falling out. And within one generation, all of the next children that were born had all of those same characteristics that he was witnessing in the UK children: crooked teeth, narrow faces, narrow jaws, sinus issues, allergies, problems with fertility, problems with birth.
Fascinating.
Absolutely fascinating. It is absolutely an amazing book. You have to grab yourself a copy of it, because it's literally the only true sort of observational study that we have that really looks at the impact of diet on true sort of health and nutrition. And we don't really have, it's absolutely amazing. So let me tell you what the sacred fertility foods were, because he noticed that this was synonymous in every single tribe and village, like I said. So the foods are, and this is probably going to blow your mind, it's a little bit unusual, liver.
What?
And I can explain and I can explain why this is. So liver, every single tribe everywhere was acquiring liver and feeding it to preconceptive couples, pregnant women, young children, lactating women.
From
liver.
What animal?
Any animal that they could get. So like the Polynesian islanders would get the shark liver. The Gaelic fishing village would stuff like fish heads with oats and fish liver. I guess the Aboriginals would get kangaroo liver. Like they would all use different parts of liver, but liver, and I can explain this if you want to in a bit more detail, but liver basically has the highest concentration of all the nutrients that we need for optimal fertility.
Wow.
It's the highest concentration food of all nutrients ever: B12, iron, copper, folate, A, D, E, K2, all of the essential fertility nutrients. So liver, raw dairy. So raw. So butter and milk, and then shellfish. So oysters, mussels, clams, and fish eggs and eggs. That's it.
Like chicken eggs.
Yes.
Oh my God. That is blowing my mind.
I know everybody's mind is blown because they think I'm going to talk about, I don't know,
Kale.
goji berries, kale. That's right. Those foods are not superfoods when it comes to fertility. They're not really even superfoods. So these were the foods that every single one of those tribes was prioritizing for all of those, but, thinking about fertility for fertility. And look what those foods were giving. So when we think about the fat soluble vitamins that are really high in the liver, so that's vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, vitamin K2, those nutrients are literally creating all of that craniofacial structure and healthy teeth in the first 12 weeks of gestation.
Wow.
And Dr. Weston A. Price didn't even really understand that. He wrote everything down. His book is literally like just his journal, really. And he he sort of understood some of the concepts of vitamin A and vitamin D and the role that they play in teeth and facial development and bone health, but they didn't even know what vitamin K2 was, and vitamin K2 is one of the most important for all of those factors. Wow. And he called it activator X. And then years later, they isolated it and realized that it was vitamin K2, and it's a really powerful synthesizer of all of those other nutrients and helps the body to really utilize all of those nutrients. But
holy cow.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. So those are the sacred fertility foods.
That is fascinating. Wow. I love all of that information, and I'm like wanting to nerd out now. I have to have the link to that book.
You have to get the book. You have to get the book.
And, I do.
And the thing is, you know, a lot of people talk about, like, if you listen to functional medicine practitioners or even, you know, some integrative GPs, they'll talk about the different nutrients that are beneficial for fertility and also like during gestation, and or even if you go to a clinic and they're talking about different things that they might supplement with, an IVF clinic, you know, they're talking about vitamin D, right? And They're talking about the importance of folate, and they're talking about B12, and in many instances they're talking about iron, and basically, and sometimes they're talking about selenium, and sometimes, you know, and basically every single one of those is contained in liver.
Wow.
And it's a lot of those nutrients, they have partners, they have synergistic partners that they work together. So vitamin D works with vitamin A. Now, there's a bit of conjecture around that, but we'll just put that to the side. We can talk about it if you want to. But vitamin D and A, they work together. So we should always be getting vitamin D and A from a whole food source where it has its partner. And iron works with copper, and magnesium works with potassium. So they all have they're interrelated, just like our body is.
Yes.
Because Mother Nature knows best, right?
Yes.
So just like one organ system relates to the other, and we can't really separate them. It's same. It's the same with all of these nutrients.
That makes total sense. As above, so below, right? Like
exactly.
As outside as inside. Yes.
And so if you just eat those foods, or if you supplement with a dehydrated beef liver, which is generally my recommendation, because ain't nobody wanting to eat liver these days, but you know.
You never know.
I don't mind a bit of pate myself, but a lot of people don't. But yes, if you just incorporate these foods in, then, you know, you're just giving your body what it knows what to do with.
That's amazing. Wow. Okay. So let's say someone has started with the liver, they've started with the raw dairy, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh God, that sounds terrible.
No, it's fabulous.
There's ways that you can incorporate it in a less, yes. But anyway, yes, carry on.
Oh gosh, yes. This is just like a whisper of what the information is, I'm sure, right? That's all we have time for on this, you know, in an episode. But I'm curious about moving into this other aspect of your work, because now we've talked about the body, like what you can do on the physical level, but you also incorporate a lot of mind, body, spirit stuff, like all of those together. And I'm wondering how can you just expand on that? What do you do with your clients to help this whole person, the whole soul, everything? What do you do?
Well, my greatest teacher, Paul Chek, you know, I guess his learning platform, the holistic lifestyle coaching through him, it is so holistic. So, you know, what I always say to my clients is we are physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual beings. And any approach that is not looking at all of those aspects is not holistic, and it's incomplete. And so, you know, when I'm working with my clients, of course, you know, I want to get down to the nitty-gritty with their nutrition. I want to make sure that they're eating those foods, and also that they're eliminating foods like gluten, like you alluded to, and other foods, I call them kryptonite foods. You know, that's important. But there's all these other aspects that we need to incorporate for our health, for the health to be holistic, truly holistic. And, you know, some of those are still practical. Like, you know, I love working on sleep and, you know, looking at what they're doing with their light environment day and night and those types of things, and looking at chemicals in their environment. Obviously, that's really important in terms of fertility. But also, you know, I like to, I mean, let's just talk really simply about stress. You know, that's one that, and then we can talk more about some of the esoteric concepts, but, you know, that's one that I find most people can at least grasp as a concept. You know, we know, we all understand that stress is playing a role in any sort of dis-ease in our body. We know that. Everybody agrees that, from your GP through to your energy healer.
Didn't used to be that way. There's a lot of pushback. Oh gosh, so much pushback. Stress didn't cause my fertility. Are you blaming me? You know, lots of that.
Yeah, and it's still it's still in its infancy, isn't it? You know, I think that I don't think that we really understand, or I don't think that most people are really grasping the depth of stress that our bodies are exposed to. But now we all understand that concept, that, you know, something that we can't touch and see that lives in our head is actually changing our physiology and affecting it.
We got powerful brains.
Yes. And so for me, it's like we need to work on the nervous system in a more, you know, in a more, I suppose, spiritual way. Like, we need to calm that nervous system down as much as we can. And there's lots of ways that we can do that, like practically by reducing stressors, but also by integrating stress management techniques like meditation, like breath work. But then, you know, the other side of it is, you know, even sort of more metaphysical than that, is the spiritual side of it. You know, are you unfulfilled in your life like I was? You know, are you, you know, for some women there may be blocks there that are spiritual. Are you in a relationship that isn't fulfilling you? Are you feeling, you know, really disconnected from who you are? Are you not honoring your feminine aspects? Are you mainly in your masculine? You know, there's all of these things that again, like I said, we can't touch and see them, but those things can be just as prohibitive to that fertility experience as not eating those nutrient-dense foods.
Yes.
Are you afraid? Are you so afraid because you've had so many failed IVF cycles? Or are you carrying trauma from your relationship with your mother or father that is stopping you because there's a fear there that you're going to parent in the way that you were parented?
Yes. Yeah.
And those things need to be explored just as much as eating liver and drinking raw dairy, if that makes sense.
Yes, and baking amazing banana bread. Yes,
exactly.
It's all important. Also, I wondered if you find with your clients that, okay, so for example, again, just my own personal experience doing this, my own thing for my thyroid, that before I started, I realized I am not as calm as I normally am. I'm a pretty chill person, but I hadn't been for a while. And I'm a meditator. I do these, you know, very spiritual, like esoteric things. But when I started eating well, I calmed even more. Right. So it's kind of all, you see what I'm saying? Okay.
Oh my gosh.
Find that. Okay.
And do you know what? Like, and this again, like I hate to keep referencing him, but it's why I love the Czech philosophy so much, because meditation and other breath work and other things like that, I think that they're great, but I never introduce them until I've worked on the physical body. Because I think that most people's nervous systems are so wound up that they can't, and you know, obviously most of us have heard, maybe, you know, this is even resonating with some of your listeners, I can't sit in meditation, my mind is too busy.
Every day.
And obviously everybody says that, but like literally a lot of people, I think they actually physically can't. We have to calm their nervous system down. If they're not well nourished, their body is in fight or flight. It's in that stress response. Like if they're fasting, if they're over exercising, if they're surrounded by crazy Wi-Fi, whatever it might be, their body is literally trying to run from a predator. You can't sit in meditation if there's a predator behind you trying to eat you.
Right.
So it is important to get to eat regularly and to nourish your body and to do some of those things first. And then you can actually sit and get the benefits of that breath work and meditation.
Fascinating. Fascinating stuff. Okay. All right, good. So when you work with folks, you first start with the level of the body, and then you move into these other mind, emotion, spirit practices, and as supportive or what's complementary, like they go together, they all go together.
Yes.
Okay, very cool. So what are the practical tools? So I'm a Taurus, so I'm very practical. So
love
so
it.
meditation, right? Do you talk about movement, moving your body? Do you talk about hugging trees? Like what are the practical things that you talk about with people?
So look, here's the thing, right? The first thing I would say is that if we're thinking about stress, there's so many things that we don't really think about. When we think about stress, we think about the obvious things like financial stress, work stress, relationship stress. Like we've all got that, right? Or we've all had that at one point or another in our life. And let's face it, most of us have it on and off. And yeah, that's fine. We've all got that. But the thing is, there's all these other things that are, I use the analogy of a bucket, where, like, imagine your body is like a bucket, and there's all these things going into your stress bucket that we're not aware of. So, one of the things is the physical stress of sitting all day, or the physical stress of over exercising, so doing too many HIIT classes or running all the time or whatever, or the physical stress of under exercising. And then there's chemical stressors, which I've alluded to, already, but, all of the different personal care products that we're putting on our body, that is literally creating a stress response in our body. Then there's electromagnetic stress, which we can't even control that necessarily, but we're surrounded by our own personal devices. All of those are operating at a higher frequency, hertz frequency, than our own bodies operate. So they literally wind up our nervous system. So we've got, and then there's and this is a big one for women that are struggling with fertility. Then we've got this little guy in here, like our negative thought patterns just barking at us, especially if we're stressed about our fertility. You're not fertile, you can't, you're, plus all the other stuff, you're fat, you're horrible, whatever.
That's little plus voice. All the other stuff. That's right.
So part of what I teach is, first we have to pull some of that stuff out, because the bucket's already full. And that, if that bucket's full, then it's breath work, meditation, hugging trees is sort of pointless, and you're not really going to get the benefit from it. So the first step from a practical perspective is really looking at all of those things and assessing, like, how can I remediate against some of this? And then yes, then for me it's I love meditation. I love people to go and get back to nature, and ideally, if they can, barefoot. We have the most stunning beaches here in WA, Western Australia. So a lot of my clients can go and walk barefoot on the beach, but just even going into a park or going somewhere in nature and being on your own is a really great way to calm your nervous system down. So they're some of my favorite things that I like to do. Also, this one I think is a really helpful one, and maybe it's more about emptying the bucket a little bit, but just boundaries. Like, how bad are women at the boundaries is probably step one, because most women they don't even have time to do any of that stuff. They're just doing 10,000 things, and it's like you have to say no, and you have to create some space, because if you don't, you're not even going to be able to do any of these things. Yes.
Oh my gosh, that's a huge point. That's actually one of the things that I do spirit baby sessions with people, and I'm able
I love that.
I'm able to see their chakra system. And the one thing that I've noticed as a huge pattern is huge, like giant heart chakras. And it's a lovely concept, right? They're just so loving and giving and compassionate. The problem is you got to rein it in, babe. People get in there and
breast cancer.
Right. People get in there and they infiltrate and they take advantage, and they, and so having compassion and love is beautiful. Start with you and create some boundaries. Create some boundaries with no. It just popped in my head, you saying yes to marriage when your body was like, no.
Yes, exactly.
People, you can feel it. You can feel, I really need to say no, but I'm going to say yes because I feel bad.
Yeah.
I don't want to disappoint. I don't want to.
Yes.
So lovely point. And then again, practical me, I was running through your podcast, which is called Elevate, by the way, folks, check it out. There was a topic called ritual or rituals. And because I'm very practical, I'm like, I wonder if that's a thing, that you can utilize to work through all of these new ways of being. What did you cover in that? And tell us about it. What's the importance there?
Yeah, so I was thinking about that. That was a podcast we recorded quite a while ago, and we recorded it because I think rituals was like the New York Times, like in that particular year, maybe it was 2018 or maybe even earlier. Anyway, it was like the word of the year, or the buzzword of the year. Yeah, but because Amanda, my podcast co-host, and I both have quite a lot of self-care rituals in our life and our day, we thought that it was a really great topic to share and discuss. But thinking about it now in the context of this and what I do, I think that the thing about rituals that is so important for our health is that what we really need to create holistic health, which is embodied physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health, is consistency of practice, right? Like if you change your diet for a week, that is not going to make a difference. If you meditate for a week, that is not going to make a difference. We have to do these things consistently over time, which is less sexy, right? It's a little bit boring. But, if we can create rituals around things, so part of our day, this is what we do. We wake up in the morning and we do 10 minutes of breath work. And then, for me, I always scrape my tongue in the morning, which I think is really important to get rid of all of the toxins that are built up overnight. But I just have all of these things that are just part of my everyday routine, and they are habits now. So I think if we can create rituals around things, then they can become habits, and those habits over time will create true holistic health.
Beautiful. Yes. And it's very practical, right? It's like you set this up in a way that that's just what I do. That's just what I do.
Yes.
And it feels so easy after a while.
And it doesn't have to be like, that's the other thing that I like to impress on my clients. Like a lot of the stuff that I do with my clients is quite simple. It's foundational, and it's like, it doesn't have to be complicated. And it doesn't have to be, if you're just starting out, if we use meditation as an example, just do 5 minutes. Like I get my clients like, just do 5 minutes every single day. That's, 35 minutes a week. That's so much better than nothing.
Yeah.
And over time you're going to build the muscle of meditation, and then, you'll be able to do longer. And the same applies with everything. So, it doesn't have to be this crazy complicated hours and hours of your life. And the more that you can build in these practices and habits, the more flow and ease you'll have with all of it.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Okay, so I can talk to you for like 5 more hours,
I
but
know,
let's not do
totally.
that. Let's not do that because we have lives to live.
We do.
Where
And
can,
it's getting late over there for you. You probably need
it
to have your
is
dinner.
the sun is going down. I already had my lovely
Okay,
healthy
good.
dinner, but
Great.
I need to drink my aloe water.
Okay, perfect.
um, where can people find you? What's the website, and what other contact
Yes.
information would you like to give people?
Yes, so my website is health-wellbeing.com.au because obviously I'm over here in Aussie land.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And probably where I'm most prolific is Instagram, and that is at Shopkins Health. So S Hopkins Health, and obviously you'll link in the show notes.
Yep. You bet.
And I do have an online program that I've just released, and it's called Luminous, because obviously when we're nice and healthy and fertile, we're luminous. And it's basically like coaching with me. So it's video modules with written content and action items, and it's all of the steps that I took to heal my own fertility, and that I have worked with hundreds of women over the last 10 years to help them heal their fertility.
Beautiful.
So yeah, that's me.
We'll be linking to all of it. Sarah,
Amazing.
thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This was so much fun. I loved it.
Yes, I need to have you back.
Yes, I'd love to.
You'll be so great.